Hi everybody, this is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, Stories of the Supernatural, and you're going to see some clips of a visit that I made on two different occasions, once during the daytime and once at night, to a small undisclosed cemetery not far from where I live, which is called Silvergreen Cemetery. And this cemetery was used from around the turn of the century, and the last burial was in 1955. And you'll see throughout the videos I'm kind of describing what the history of this cemetery is. And what's really interesting is this served the African American population that lived here in South Dade County throughout those years, because unfortunately the regular cemeteries segregated the populations, and sometimes didn't even permit burials from any other race except Caucasians. So what happened was, in this case, and like I said, you'll see the explanation throughout the video, that alternative methods were made. And what's really interesting is this is called Silvergreen Cemetery, and it's not a potter's field, because obviously these people were named, even though many of their graves are not there anymore. But at the same time, you realize that this is not, you go to some old cemeteries that are not in use anymore, and you still have the gate, or you still have an entrance, and there's some type of upkeep, and you go in there, and that doesn't exist for the cemetery. This basically has not been developed, thankfully, but it's just surrounded by a lot of agricultural area. There's no fancy gate, or just not even a gate, nothing. There's nothing here to designate that this was a burial place for human beings, which, from what I'm finding in my research, it puts it at about one step from an unofficial cemetery or a boneyard, or it's not even a pauper's grave, because a pauper's grave, you know, those are usually designated as in one part of an official cemetery. And thankfully it has not been built on. But I'm going to let you guys see, because I think it sheds a light on what old Florida was like, and you're going to find that situations like this, or scenarios like this, played out all over the country, especially when cities were developing and you just had populations of either very poor people, or indigents, or transients, or people that for some reason were being excluded from the main facilities or the infrastructure that would start to be added into a city as it's starting to be created. So I think that it's very interesting, because it speaks about what was happening here in South Florida during the turn of the century. I hope you enjoyed. Here we go, guys. Hi everybody, this is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, Stories of the Supernatural, and I brought you out today to a very, very unusual and very little known cemetery here in Miami-Dade County. The name of the cemetery is Silvergreen Cemetery, okay? And the last known burial here was in June of 1955, okay? Now, as you can see behind me, you're hardly going to see any tombstones or anything. As a matter of fact, there's only one out there, and it's not because they're flat either. Let me explain. This was the cemetery that was used by the African American population here in South Dade County, usually in the Goulds, Perrine, Florida City, Homestead area, to bury their dead. Now, what happened was, this piece of land came into the hands of the Masons, the lodge, the local lodge that was here in this area, okay? And there was a company here by the name of Drake Lumber Company, and the owner negotiated with the Masons that he offered this land for the black workers who was coming to be buried here. Now, as you can understand, a lot of these workers were really, really poor. Okay, they had little or no money, and unfortunately, even when it came to burying their dead. Now, you're going to see what's really interesting here is that these workers, sometimes basically, when they passed away, they had to depend on how wall-like they were, because what would happen a lot of times is that, remember, like I said, this was, the burials here took place between the late 1919 to 1955. it was $150 just for you to get an idea of what the economics were behind burying someone back in those days. It was usually going to cost $150 to just to buy a cloth-covered casket. Okay, a lot of the families did not have that money for their loved ones. So basically what they would do is they would pass the hat around to families and friends and hope for a donation, okay? $25 right off the bat just came towards for the Masons to allow them to bury somebody here, and then it was $5 for the grave digger and then other costs. But as you could tell, $150 back then was a lot of money, even when you were talking about the least expensive way of burying someone. Now, like I said before, as you're going to see, there's hardly any tombstones here. And you know why? Because they didn't have the money for, basically, to even put down a tombstone. You're going to see that all we have, and a lot of them, is just going to be shallow indentations on the ground, or because this is coral rock. And I'm going to tell you also another story about why, because believe it or not, you would think $5 for the grave digger, and I'm going to explain to you why. This out here in South Florida, Miami-Dade County, this is coral rock. And if you pan down, let me take a look, let them see that. You hardly have any grass, that's everywhere. You hit rock right away. Now what would happen is, prior to 1919, it would take men 2 days to dig a grave, okay? Because they would have to come with a bunch of equipment and pickaxes and muscle just to go and be able to dig a grave. Well, back in 1919, there was a gentleman who unfortunately had his sister-in-law die of tuberculosis. And he was very skilled in the use of dynamite. So guess what he did? Maybe probably to even save his family the money of having to spend on 2 days worth of work to pay for somebody to dig a hole. What he did was he took a dynamite and he opened the grave in 6 hours. Okay, in 6 hours. Well, guess what? This gentleman, that his name was, well, he had 2 names. He had a real name. His real name was Johnny Everett, but they called him Catman. After he learned how to do that, he became the grave digger here until 1955, basically until the last burial, because he became the official grave digger. He was able to do it in 6 hours with dynamite. Can you imagine if you lived in this area, even back then, with, you know, once you heard it go off, you knew that somebody was getting buried. So anyway, let's keep going. He became the official grave digger, and he would basically use the dynamite to clear. I don't know. Like I said, I really am not sure. I mean, I do have a legend, which I'm going to post on the show, of who are the burials here. Right here we have a big circle, okay, and it's just too circular, in other words, for it to be anything but man-made. I have no idea if in the past they had some type of monument, or if they had anything placed here, but as you can tell, the only thing right now is just a little bit where the circle just is left there. You know, maybe once upon a time they had maybe some type of small garden or anything like that. Now, as you can tell, believe it or not, you see right here these shallow squares. These are graves. These are the graves of the people that were buried here, that the families had little or no money. Sometimes they even, you know, the Masons and the people that would take payment would kind of forgive the debt a little bit when they couldn't raise the money and just allow them to be buried. But what would happen, of course, is that these people did not even have money to put a tombstone as remembrance for their family members. Okay, here's another one, and I'm sure these are the ones that are uncovered by grass. So I'm sure that that there's a lot of plots here that basically I'm walking. And by the way, before I got here, I did a little tour, and I respectfully asked for anybody here that's buried in the cemetery to forgive me if I kind of walked over their grave without knowing. But it's just like As you can tell, about the only one that I've found so far was this monument right here, which is for a John Thomas bird. And I think he was able to get a monument because it looks like he might have served in the armed forces. He was a private, and he passed away August 13th of 1938, which is, as a matter of fact, he was something engineers, private 20, I'm not sure, or I'm not sure what that stands for. Okay, but anyway, he probably got this because he was in the armed forces. But if you were not a person that basically that the government was going to come in and give you money, you were going to basically end up the same way as many of the people that are here. You know, you didn't, your family, as much as they would love to put some type of memorial, and like I said, from what I know, if there were any small memorials or flowers, considering that the last burial was in 1955, it makes me believe that it's not here. And I'm not really sure. I don't know if at some point they were being used, because I'm not that familiar with cemetery things, funeral. I don't know if these were being used to house any remains, or at some point they were collected. I'm not really sure. I'm going to see if I can find out. Because I don't think it's happenstance that you have all these cement, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, looks like 10 different cement vaults, and they've got handles at the top, okay, which leads me to believe that at some point they were thinking, okay, well, we might need to pry these up, so maybe there was some point that that they were, something was put in them. We do have another tombstone here. Okay, this is, again, this is another person that was in the armed forces. He was also private, and he passed away in February of 1925. His name is, boy, unfortunately that is gone. J-U-L, could be Julius, I don't know, something, the last name starts with an R. I'll look at the legend, because I do have the legend, not here. And I'm going to see if I can find who this person was. Again, as you could see, so far the only markers I've found are people that served in the armed forces, and that was because apparently, you know, you would get a tombstone placed, I guess, as part of your of being a deceased that had at one time maybe served in the army or something like that. He was again in the, like that other gentleman, he was in 20th ENGRS. I don't know if that's engineers. I'm not sure what that stands for. Again, this was a while back. Now what I'm going to do is, in the meantime, I am going to start running my little mini ovilus thing, okay, and see if anybody wants to come and say something, because you know what, despite this being as removed as it is, I still do believe that, you know, like I said, when I came out here, I did basically, I said, look, I'm very respectfully just coming out here to document this place where, you know, your people placed you, and if there's anybody here, I don't mean to offend you or, you know, or trample on your grave, and you know, but let's see if anybody comes through and gives us a name or something that has anything to do with anything here. Okay, again, you know, there's a lot of little shallow indentations that leads me to believe that that we might be able to find something that, you know, let me see if I can see if we can find something here. Okay, I've got it going, and you know what, I have found that this usually works. A lot of people want to ask direct questions, hoping that they're going to get some type of response, but the best results, believe it or not, that I have found have been when I'm just talking and then somebody puts in a word or a name or something, just because it's like, hey, they want to be included in the conversation. Okay, like I said, because sometimes they just cannot cannot come through it right at the very moment that you ask them about this. So anyway, we're going to, like I said, I don't see any other memorials here. I just see a lot of shallow indentations. Like I said, I'm sure there's a lot of graves that once upon a time, even if they had some small place marker or flowers or anything from the family, that has long been gone. Lettuce. Okay, well, let's see, maybe the rest of it will come to us later. Let's walk over here and see if we can find anything else. As you can tell, this is surrounded by, there's some agriculture going on over there and down there. So, you know, you still have, over here, looks like they have a big pump there for probably a watering system. Okay, now, another interesting thing about this, what was happening here with the African American community back in those days was normally what they would do is that they would hold funeral services on Sundays after the 11 a.m. service, okay, and usually lasted until 2 p.m. All right, so and what would happen is, of course, the church would get really crowded because everybody would come for Sunday service and then stay afterwards for what was being done for the person that was deceased. And what happened was that a lot of the people would crowd the church because it was like the equivalent of a funeral service, in other words. And a lot of them, because of the transportation problem, because this out here was, I guess, very remote and it was difficult to get to. So what would happen is friends and family of the deceased would go into the church for the services because they knew they weren't going to be able to get out here for the actual burial. So what happened is they would all stay there until 2 p.m. All right. Then, as a matter of fact, the families that did, they had to walk over here. They would walk for the services. Okay. And now what would happen is once that funeral was held here, okay, a lot of them just would not go back for evening services to the church. Okay, now this church depended on the contributions from the members as far as to keep its doors open, to pay its bills, just like they do now. What was happening is they wouldn't go back for their evening services. It got to the point that the minister there, he basically, as a matter of fact, even for his salary, he was coming up short. What happened is there was an increase of Sunday funerals, okay? And of course, remember also, this was a time when also Sundays, not only because of the travel difficulties, this was when most workers had the day off. You know, that they were able to actually go and attend services. They kind of rolled everything into one. They went to their church services, to the funeral, and some of them actually came and walked over here to actually go to the burial itself. But what would happen is, I guess they were so spent, especially, that they would not go back to the church for their evening services. So what happened was that the church was losing money. It was significant. It was significant because when there was so many services, I guess after a while, that basically the ministers told the funeral directors, guess what, we are not going to be holding these on Sundays anymore. And because what happened was, and remember, I'm sure the church didn't say we're not going to hold funeral services. They said we're not going to hold funeral services on Sunday. Okay, and again, we would get into the difficulty of that if you worked the most of the week and you had problems traveling, guess what? Probably your only day that you were actually able to come to a service was on a Sunday. So from what I understand is that happened, like I said, the last burial happened in 1955, and it was also at that time that that the Masons also sold the land. I don't know who they sold it to. But apparently, from what I've seen, they've never developed it. You know, I believe this is probably the actual land, but it's, I don't know who holds it now. Okay, and like I said, let's see if we can find something else. So far I've only gotten one word, lettuce. Wow. Okay. For all you know, there might be some obscure reference to who knows what, you know, but like I said, here you've got some pumping stuff. Some shallow indentations here. Okay. There's another one's over here. Okay. It looks like these were like probably side by side. You can tell the elements. I guess maybe once they were dug up. That's it. You know, really. Well, the grass here is not that good anyway, but a little cover, if any. Okay, here you could. See if maybe there's even some. As you could tell, you know, which is what happens with a lot of these graves. After a while, they kind of collapse in a little bit on themselves. And considering that this was coral, even after all these years, you can tell that due to the elements and just what happens, they kind of collapsed in on themselves. Let me see what we've got over here. Okay. Like I said, you know, and I'm thinking, you know, even, I'm sure that there's got to be family members for the people that were buried here, even if the last one was in 1955, that are still alive. Because if you were a child or very young back in 1955 or the 1950s or the 1940s, very easily still alive, and you could have family members buried out here. And I'm wondering, even at this point, if there could be any way to even find your family members. You know, what I'm going to do is I'm going to attach a link for the legend of the people that are, the names of the people that are buried here. Okay. Just in case anybody wants to do some research on their family members and maybe they came from this area, maybe they're not here any longer and they're wondering, I wonder if my grandfather, my uncle, or my great-grandfather, my great-grandmother, this is, maybe you have somebody in your family who's talked about, hey, you know, that is where they're buried. And like I said, I don't think the legend, though, has an exact map which says in relations to where the burials are. But let's see over here. I think we've got something over here. There might have been some type of memorial or garden or something that was here that's long been obliterated, unfortunately, because of time and, of course, upkeep. You know, all these, whether they're gardens or memorials, they depend on upkeep. Yeah, I think we've got a couple of more tombstones here. Let's see. Yep. Okay. Alright, now this looks like, again, this is, unfortunately, this is really, you can hardly make it out. See, something like 1932? Arrive. I just got the word arrive, which is like very appropriate. I wonder if I arrived at somebody's tomb, whoever it is that's trying to like make something known. Okay, and this one, okay, as you can tell, this right here, this was hand carved, basically. Look at this. This is what I mean, that this is, Bond, August 12th, no, 1933, died June. Can't make out what's at the bottom of that. But it probably, the reason why it's still here, just based on the ways that this was, what does it say there? Mother, can't make out the rest. Harr, something Bond, Harry Bond. Well, anyway, chances are that the reason that why this is still here was this was one of the later burials, towards, like I said, right before 1955, when they didn't have any more burials. And this one over here, okay, and unfortunately this one here, you cannot do anything about what's on it at all. Okay, let me see, we've got another one over here. And let me tell you something, when I looked at the list of people, there's quite a few people buried here, believe me. So when we're only looking at maybe so far, what, 3, 4, 5 tombstones, this is very little compared to the amount of people that were buried here. Not that many in comparison to other cemeteries, there's still quite a lot. Okay, let's see. Got it again. This is 1954. That's the only thing I can think of. So again, see, this was a family that had a little bit more money. They were able to put this over the tomb of their loved ones. And again, like I said, we got another word, several. Well, if you've got something else, you want to give us a name? Try to give us a name, and let's see. Let us hear what a name so that I can follow up on it. Again, you know, not everybody, and like I said, usually the most recent ones that were buried in the sense of before 1955 were the ones that that were buried here in Silvergreen Cemetery. Let's see. It's a little bit almost, I don't want to say comical, but in a way it is. You know, when if you were not a well-liked person, when your family passed the hat around, or your friends or whoever was there to get money to bury you, if you were not well-liked, guess what? There was no money that was put forward. Okay, office. Maybe this will make sense later on after I do a little bit more research. But anyway, what I was saying was, if you were not a well-liked person, or for some reason, family, friends, nobody was willing, not even to put something in the hat, I don't know what would happen to you. I even wonder if any people were put in the ground without benefit of a casket. You know, that if they could only come up with $30, which was $25 for the masons in order to put you in the ground here, and then $5 for the gravedigger. And if they would just wrap you in a shroud, because guess what? If they could only rustle up $30, I wonder if that occurred here. Which I don't see how it cannot. Especially, what if you didn't have a family, or your family had very little money, or you just weren't a well-liked person, you know? Well, guess what? Let's see. By a lot of agriculture. Okay. Again, you know, it's really difficult to say. You know, that, like I said, this was what, over 50 years ago, more than 50 years that nobody's been buried out here. You know, like I said, even if the family members are alive, that's another thing. They would have to actually still be living in the area. As a matter of fact, represent. Okay, maybe somebody wants to get represented. I don't know. Well, which is what your family would do for you. You know, these were your representatives, you know. These are the people that would talk, hopefully, good of you in your eulogy, and, you know, at that church service till 2 p.m. These were the people that were going to represent you and hopefully speak highly about you, or about your friends, about who you were to your family. And it makes me wonder if maybe a lot of the people that are buried here in this area didn't have anybody to represent them. Didn't have anybody to say anything on their behalf of who they were, where they come from. maybe who their people were originally, because they had to, maybe not all of them. You know, it's like they said, you know, some of these were workers tied into that Drake Lumber Company, and maybe they had come from other places seeking work back in the 1920s, and you know, maybe they had left family behind, either in another part of the state or even out of state. And you know what? They had nobody to represent them. So maybe that's what part of that word has to do with where we're at. Let me see. I'm gonna go ahead and let me see. I'm gonna turn this off for just a second. Let me see if we can pick up something. Hey guys, so what did you think? Okay, well, as you saw me tramping around in the daytime, and I apologize for the audio, but sometimes the wind doesn't care that you're out there trying to like get something recorded. But as you could see, I did go back, and I'm going to show you that clip afterwards. But in the meantime, I said, you know what? Let me throw in another visit that I did to another cemetery real quick, which was what are called the either the Potter's Field or Pauper's Grave that we have here in Miami-Dade County. And there's two cemeteries like that. One of them now, which was originally called the Potter's Field, is now called Galloway Cemetery, and the other one is basically the Medical Examiner Cemetery. Okay, the one at Galloway is a little bit older. They've been burying people there since like the 1920s, 1930s, and I guess the point I'm trying to make is, well, of course, people that are buried here are either one, people that are known, but for some reason either they're indigent, they have no money and no family, or the families can't afford to bury them, or sometimes you have remains that are just unidentified, which of course means there's no family. So after a while, the county takes it upon themselves to inter these people. Recently, you know, what they do is they cremate the remains, all right? And basically what they do is they bag them and they put them like in these PVC tubes, all right? And they just, and when you go out to these fields, all you get are like basically stone blocks in some cases with a number, okay? And you know, in other words, you have no dates, no names, nothing. Some of them, you know, if they have the name, you would have to go to the offices to get that information. And some of them, like I said, if this is an unidentified person, of course, you know, there is no name to put on there. And I guess, again, if you want any more information, but I wanted to include, because this was, to me, was very sad. And, you know, when I was visiting the Silvergreen, you know, there at least you had family that could kind of note that you had actually existed. And for example, as you're going to see in those slides that you're looking at right now, for example, we had a gentleman out here, all right, and his name was Yellis Knighton, and Yellis was originally from Georgia, okay, and he died back in 1937, all right, and he was pretty old, but he got run over back in 1930, which, by the way, that highway still does exist. I'm sure it was not as busy. Well, it's not. It's definitely busier now than it was back in 1937. But he was killed by a hit-and-run driver, and then you have that other gentleman, Harlan. He was born in 1914 in Washington State. Okay, I did a little bit of research for him, and I found that he was a private stationed in Hawaii in 1940, which would, to me, this was like right before Pearl Harbor in 1941. And somehow or other, this guy ended up dying here in Miami in 1989 and buried in a pauper's grave. And it makes you think, what happened to these people, you know, that they ended up being buried in a pauper's grave. Now, and another thing I wanted to, you know, and I'm thinking to myself, well, can you imagine now in modern times where we have, there's records being kept as far as identification? Can you imagine when unidentified bodies were found and they were just buried, especially if there was some type of foul play involved? Nobody ever knew what happened to you or followed up on it. And I'm going to make a point here. These are two cases, okay? These were two bodies that were interred up in what they call the Indigent Cemetery in Orange County, okay? Which is like that area of Daytona Beach, a little bit further north in Florida, okay? First one is a girl by the name of Colleen Osborne. She's 15 years old. She disappears in March of 1984, and I think within a couple of weeks of her disappearance, they find a girl's body. All right. I read up on it, and apparently there was a little bit of misinformation with the coroner, but bottom line, they didn't identify her. She was unidentified, and she got buried in the Indigent Cemetery. Unnamed, unknown girl is found murdered by a fisherman. Okay. Now, back in it was, I don't know if you guys have seen that show of Dr. G. She's the medical examiner for up in that area. All right, and she, I believe it was in like in the 2000s, she actually was able to get some DNA, okay, and started again comparing the notes and verified that this was the body of Colleen Osborne, okay, that had disappeared back in 1984. And not only that, that they believe she was one of the victims of serial killer Christopher Wilder, okay, because he just happened to have been in Daytona Beach at the time that she disappeared. So they're almost pretty sure, because remember, he killed himself when he was surrounded by police, so there's no way to actually, but they're, from what I read, they're pretty sure that he murdered this girl, you know, on his way to kill other girls and eventually kill himself. Now, the other one, again, was also in Orange County. All right, this was back in 1986. Back in 1986, there's a girl who's crossing I-4, Interstate 4, which is a super busy highway. Okay, she gets struck by a truck, gets killed instantly. Okay, no identification. Again, she's interred in the Indigent Cemetery. Back in 2009, one of her friends, who she originally was, by the way, because at that time they didn't know, starts looking her up. Bottom line, traces her because they had done an artist rendition of her as an unidentified victim and identified her as Serena Ballant. Okay, when she got killed, she was 17 years old. She was originally from Wyoming. She had run away from her 42-year-old abusive husband. That's how she ended up down here in Florida. And what's even sadder is none of her family members had ever reported her missing. Okay? In other words, if it hadn't been for that friend of hers from many years ago who decided to try to find her and look up and see what was going on with her, nobody would have been any the wiser as to what happened to Serena. So, and this goes to show you sometimes how important it is just to have somebody to say who you were, what happened to you, even if it is one person. Now, you're going to see me go into the night visit over to Silvergreen. And the reason also I wanted to point out these little stories about just the Indigent or the Pauper Cemetery and here in Miami-Dade County and up in Orange is that some of these are the settings for what I call intelligent hauntings. And let me explain why. Because these are the people, this sometimes, besides the fact that some of them are murdered or die violently and suddenly, it's that they have no one to say what happened to them or to even let their families know. Or let's say even the case of Yellis, he got run over by hit and run. I didn't find any information where that person that killed him was ever brought to justice. Okay, so again, these are all, in my experience, are the circumstances that produce intelligent hauntings of people who don't rest easy, sometimes because they had a very tumultuous life, but after death, they have this unresolved, just for somebody to say, I mattered, I was important, this is what happened to me, or this is who I am, like these two girls who lay for so many years in graves with no type of identification and nobody none the wiser as to who they truly were. So anyway, we're going to go into the nighttime visit over to Silvergreen, and you're going to see I've got my ovilus working again. And it proves to be a really interesting visit because, of course, one thing is to go to a cemetery in the daytime. Totally different when you go there at night. So guys, check it out. I hope you like it. Hi everybody, this is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, Stories of the Supernatural. And as promised, I've come back here to the Silvergreen Cemetery, which is an African-American cemetery that served the area of Homestead, Goulds, Princeton, and you know, part of the show is I'm going to show when I was out here in the daytime. And basically, what it was, the Drake Lumber Company asked the Masons who owned this piece of property if it was okay for them to go ahead and bury their workers here. Okay, so what happened was that the Masons agreed to that. Okay, what is this? Okay, something broke here. But anyway, so come on. Ooh. Okay, somebody broke a pipe or something here. Okay, so as you know, guys, I was out here during the daytime, and I looked at, right now there's about 5 tombstones that are left, that are actually standing, and you know, right now what we've got also is a lot of shallow indentations. Okay, so anyway, you're going to see that when I was out here in the daytime, I said, well, you know what, I want to come back out here in the nighttime because I'm very curious to see if we pick up anything. And I have my little mini ovilus ready to go. Okay, I'm going to turn it on. And let's see if anything comes on. But as you know, what happens is that what we're going to do is, I usually don't ask it questions, is that I wait just to see if anything comes through, which sometimes things do. But anyway, what I did find out and research from the last time was that the reason why there's really no headstones left, with the exception of a couple of later ones and the ones for the military guys, was that most of the families, they only put wooden crosses because they were poor, and you know, there's a big difference in price between a wooden cross and a wooden or a tombstone that's carved and etched. So of course, the last burial having occurred here in 1955, kind of like it left, you know, those crosses to deteriorate. And I mean, there was burials here since the turn of the century. Okay, so we're talking about the very least 50-something years to more than that. So of course, these wooden crosses, they be obliterated, which is why we don't have, you know, anything, you know, left to, you know, to what did I get here? Temper. Okay, let's see. So anyway, okay, I'm lighting the way a little bit here. I don't stumble. There's not that much out here. And like I said the first time that I was out here, because I'm sure that there's graves here that there's really no indentation there here for, that I asked whoever is buried here, that, I mean, no disrespect, it's just that there's just no way to know where some of the people are buried, because there's not, not only there's no headstone, there's nothing, there's no indentation, nothing to mark where they're buried. And I know there's at least 60 people buried here, if not more. Again, those records are sketchy. You know, when I looked at the legend, sometimes you do have full names, but some you only had the first name or the last name and maybe what they did. I did find out that the 2 soldiers that are buried out here that were privates that served in World War I, they both... Jason. Okay, I'm going to find out if there's any Jason. I can't remember right off the bat if there's any Jason that's part of the people that are buried here. But anyway, they both served in what they call the 20th Engineers, okay, which went to France during World War I, and they were like the equivalent of, their engineering were like basically with woods, or they served in France. I looked up, as a matter of fact, on the show I'm going to have both of their World War I cards that showed that they're both buried here and that they served in France during World War I with the Army, with the 20th Engineers. That was a division that they were with. And by the way, of course, because they served in the military, they did have those tombstones, which is the only reason we know that they're buried here, because they had you know, something that One died in 1925 and the other one died in 1938. So despite one of the tombstones being almost 100 years old, it's still there, it's still carved, and it's still standing. But anyway, again, and I showed this to you guys when I was here. Right now, all we got out here is this very thick coral, which anybody that lives in this area knows that this is back-breaking work to dig a hole here. For even a larger tree, let alone something that's deep enough to bury somebody in there. And let's see. Thankfully, like the last time I was here during the daytime, there was a lot of wind. Deal. It was very windy. And it was really difficult. And now I'm very glad that that there's hardly any wind. And when I was out here, I had a lot of people when I was live streaming on on Facebook and on Twitter via Periscope. There were people asking me if I was going to come back out that night. Unfortunately, the weather was not that good. It had been raining all afternoon. And this is not the place to be out. If it's rainy, you can easily get struck by lightning. Plus, it's not a place to be out here when it's raining. But let's see if anybody shows up. By the way, guys, if you do see something behind me, or you hear something, let me know once I release this show, because I really would like to. I know that sometimes people see things, especially from behind the person. Come on. This is, I'm not going to go all the way to that, but right here, we've got one of the first, probably right here, one of the shallow indentations. There was a grave, and like I said, later. That there's no way, the legend I have as far as the who's buried out here, I haven't been able to locate a map. To be honest, I don't think anybody even kept those records as to who was here. Maybe once upon a time somebody did, but I couldn't locate anything to indicate who's buried in certain places. Here's another one. What we're gonna do is I'm gonna hang out a little bit by the grave of one of the soldiers that's out here, and this is John Thomas Byrd. Like I said, he served in the coughing. You know what? That's very significant. Because who knows what this guy might have died, which, by the way, I found out, he died in 1938, drink, okay, that might definitely have some type of significance. He died in 1938. He went to France. He was involved with this when he was 23 years old. Between 1918, by the time 1919 rolled around, he had already come home, okay, which meant that he was not that old when he passed away, okay? He was less than 40 years old when he passed away, and the other soldier passed away also in his 20s. They both passed away pretty early in life because, okay, something's definitely going on, okay? Coughing, drink, go. Sometimes I come out here and I'll get a word here and a word there. That I'm getting all this right off the bat, all close together, definitely has, do you want me to go? Is that what you're saying? Let's see. But anyway, right now it feels kind of peaceful out here, which is the same thing that I felt when I was here during the daytime. And like I said, I didn't want to put it on because of the daytime hours. Things are different. And the feeling I get really is Wyoming. God, I have no idea. Right here on some of these things, I'm totally off left field. The feeling I get about this place that all in all, I feel it's pretty peaceful, but at the same time, I do feel that there is some type of attraction to this place from the periphery of these grounds where the tree lines are, okay? And that's what I'm hoping. Let's see if we can capture something along those lines. Like I said, this was different times when this cemetery was active. It was, you know, obviously they were buried here because there was segregation. They weren't being buried, you know, like now, where everybody's buried in the same spot. You know, that the owner of that lumber company, he asked the Masons, because obviously he needed his workers to have a place to get buried. And there's another cemetery not far from here, which is where the regular burials took place. And I read up on that, and they accepted, but they were segregated within the grounds. And again, this was where, you know, I guess, let's face it, these are the people that work for you, and they needed a place to bury their people, and he negotiated this for them. But again, it was different times, and like I stated in, you know, when I was out here in the daytime, that the people that were here were poor. They had to even walk over here from the church just to be able to attend the burial. And again, I'm very and I've tried, but I can't find really any. That I wonder if even some of them were just buried with shrouds on because they didn't have the money to pay for the casket. You know, it was Abel. Abel. Right off the bat, I can't remember any name on the list that's Abel, but that doesn't mean it's not, because it's Abel, not like ABEL, like a name. Again, you know, you couldn't get away from the $30, which is $25 to the Masons and $5 for the gravedigger. You had to pay that, otherwise you could not get buried here. But what if you didn't have $150, or your family, or they passed the hat around and you didn't have $150 for a casket? I would not be surprised if a lot of the people here, where if they didn't have family or friends, or if their means were very reduced, that they had to end up just basically putting them in a shroud and putting them in the ground. That's not beyond, that's the more I research this, I find that that's very possible. So anyway, let's see if anything happens. I mean, there's another. I'm going to take you to the other grave of the other soldier. Okay, and again, these are the vaults over here that are over here in the middle of this, which I have no idea if these vaults have anything to do with anything. Now, I was out here like a week ago, and that sign is standing up, so I guess somebody was out here during the daytime. Jonathan. I'm getting a lot of names. Abel, Jonathan. That's really weird. Okay. Jeffrey. Okay, see, that's what I'm saying. I'm getting name after name after name after name. That there's somebody here definitely is trying to communicate. Like I said, it's going to be more than one. When I start getting all these names, sometimes I run this and I'll get one name, and then I don't get another name maybe for the rest of the night, and I'm getting them right back to back. Okay, so obviously somebody is out here. Whether they were buried here or not, okay, there's still something going on out here. Let's see. Now, oh, okay. This is the other burial for the other soldier who also was a private, and he served in the 20th Engineers. Okay, and by the way, I found out, his name was Julius Ross, because here it's broken up, and as you could tell here, he died February 2nd of 1925. So that's what I'm saying. He was like 24 years old, like in 1920. So by the time he was 29, before he was even 30, he had passed away. All right, like the other one, he was a little bit older, but neither one of these guys lived to an old age. Lived to an old age at all. Vada, like a name, V-A-D-A, which is very unusual. That's a very unusual name, Vada. Okay. And as a matter of fact, and like I said, the Catman, the one that became a gravedigger here, he buried his sister-in-law, who was very young, back in 1919. She had died of tuberculosis. Okay. Remember here in South Florida or Miami, in 1899, we had a big yellow fever epidemic that killed a lot of people here, and what eventually became Miami. A lot of people died. Then, as everybody knows, between like 19, 16, 17, 18, maybe as far as 19, there was Spanish influenza ravaged around the world. Okay, but again, unfortunately, sometimes they really didn't keep good records. Like I said, I found their records because they were in the military, and I found their enlistment cards and where they served. But otherwise, sometimes it's really difficult to find out what happened to people, what did they die from. You know, so... And everybody thinks, well, 60 people is not a lot. It is. It is a lot for back in those days where here in Miami-Dade County or in this part, it was populated, but not that populated. It wasn't that populated. So the fact that you had so many burials here, okay, well, it attests to the fact that they were using this burial, the cemetery, I want to say for maybe at least 50, 45 years, something along those lines. So let's see if we get anything else on here. Stay a little bit quiet here and see what's going on. And you know what? The feeling I get is I'm going to put it out there because I get, and I found this time after time, that when you try to, or you're available to get communication from the other side, the ones that show up sometimes aren't necessarily what everybody expects. You're in the cemetery. It's going to be the people that are buried here. You might get entities that are not buried here, but do want to make their presence known. They have a message. They have something. And that's why I'm getting all those names. So that's why I'm saying, even though I can't say yes or no, whether some of these names are on that list of burials that are here, that doesn't mean that that spirit or that's coming out with those names is not, you know, it doesn't mean that, it doesn't matter if they're not buried here, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So, treat. You know, maybe some people, maybe it was the way we're treated. You know, that's a very difficult thing sometimes to read into. What does it mean, treated well, treated badly? In my experience, when somebody talks about treatment or treat as they were treated in the, you know, from the other side, is that they're not happy with the treatment they got. Very rarely do you get communication that they were treated well, especially when there's some type of, you know, it is any type of anybody attempting to make finger. Wow. Okay, well, finger. See, some of these words sometimes, and I know sometimes when they're communicating from the other side, this is the best they can do, but sometimes it's like really difficult, like to connect this to tumor. Okay, say finger, tumor, something like that. You absolutely, this is the kind of communication where they're trying to say, this is what happened to me. And some people are thinking, well, what does it matter? Okay, I saw something over here. Hold on a minute. I saw a shadow, like, or my camera person's shoulder, like, moved, like, really quick. And you're all gonna laugh, but it was, what I saw move was kind of either a tall kid or a short person. One of the two. It wasn't like, yeah, whoa. It's like, yeah, that was very unusual. And again, usually when I see that, that means that as dark as it is here, it was darker than, okay, let's see. But anyway, when you get something like a tumor that you would say, well, who wants to say anything about a tumor? Yes, to some people on the other side, they want to say what happened to them, like, especially if they haven't gone off to the other side. They want to say, guess what, I died of a tumor, and maybe I didn't think I was going to die, or maybe I died when I was really young, and it's not fair, and, you know, the best they can do is say tumor, you know, like there's more to that. That's their story. And sometimes, believe it or not being able to tell that story ties them to this plane. Something as simple as saying, this is why I died. I didn't think it was fair, or who knows, a million things that goes on with that individual person. We all have that their perception is their reality. So yeah, things like that, that something as simple as saying, this is what happened to me, is what they're trying to relate. And hopefully, sometimes just being able to say things like that or relate it actually sets them free. Okay? I mean, it could be, I mean, that could play out a million different ways. You know, I was sick and nobody took care of me, that treat part. I had a tumor that's not fair, I didn't expect to. Or I had a tumor, nobody knew what it was. Or maybe if it was a long time ago, nobody knew how to treat it, and it killed me. I mean, this could be a million things as to why you get these words on here. Besides the names, obviously the names is trying to get identification, but... Alright, what I'm going to do is I'm going to shut down for a little bit, guys. I'm going to see if I get anything else, and then I'll come back to you guys, okay? Hi everybody, this is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, Stories of the Supernatural. I look so scary, don't I? You know why? Because I am out here at, at Silvergreen Cemetery, okay? I was out here at daytime about a week ago, and this is an African American cemetery out here in South Dade County, okay? And I was out here during the daytime, okay? And let's face it, a cemetery in the daytime, it's not the same thing as at nighttime. So anyway, I told you guys I was going to be out here at nighttime, and here I am. Okay, it's great. It's not a windy night. Okay, it's not a windy night, so I'm hoping to pick up. I was working with my ovilus a little bit earlier. I got a bunch of names. I got words like tumor, treat. I got a lot of funky words on here. The names, it's really hard to tell. Oh, there goes my light. Wow. Here, let me see. Okay, yeah. I don't know, it's really hard to tell the names right off the bat, even though I do know who's buried out here. Okay, if they're part of the names that are coming through. Thank God I have somebody here holding a light for me. Okay, here, you know what? Because I've only got two hands. Here, let me see. Hold on, guys. Never fear. Yeah, these are the joys of going out to a cemetery, okay, in the middle of the night. Here, if you could do that for me, that way, so that I don't so people can actually see me, but I'm not squinting really hard. Anyway, guys, I'm out here. It's very dark. It's very quiet. There's no wind. It was really funny because I have somebody here helping me out. And we shall remain unnamed, like Voldemort. It's a running joke, don't worry about it. But anyway, and as long as I had the light on, because I was filming with my other camera, we got some stuff on the ovilus, but guess what? As soon as we turned off all the lights, because we were switching stuff around, immediately you felt that there was something definitely going on. It changed, everything changed. Plus earlier I had like a feeling like I did think I saw a shadow. You know, it was either a really short person or a tall kid, one of the two. Okay, and by that I mean it wasn't a little kid, like a little kid. So it was maybe a little bit older child or a smaller adult. Okay, but it was really unusual because it was earlier that this person that's here with me, I said, you know what, I get this feeling that whatever's here is on the periphery, like out by the tree lines, but it's not close by. And sure enough, as soon as we turned off all the lights, because we were switching cameras around, as soon as we did that, immediately you felt like whatever was out there like moved in to where we were at. Okay, and this is kind of desolate out here. Like there's, as you can tell, there's no street lighting, there's nothing out here. Okay, now in a minute I'm gonna turn the screen around so you guys can see. I'm going to take you around through some of the graves that are out here, which I said, you know, which I hope you guys catch my YouTube show, which I'm going to do everything that I filmed out here in the daytime and at nighttime, Miami Ghost Chronicles, every Friday at 7 p.m. on YouTube. But anyway, that, like I said, the overall feeling here, it's kind of peaceful, but at the same time, that doesn't mean that you might get entities that are not necessarily buried here.